All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Metal3 community meeting for the 2nd of November of 2020. Sorry, September of 2020. I'm sharing the agenda document now. So if you have any items that you want to talk about today, please add them to the end of the list there. I can put a link to that in the chat just in case we have anyone who does not have access to that. So I'll paste that in chat now. We normally start the meeting by asking if there's anyone new who would like to introduce themselves to the community. Do we have anybody on the call today who hasn't been on a call before or is brand new to Metal3 at all? Okay, I think everybody is a regular today. So we'll go ahead with the agenda that we have laid out here. I had 2 items on the agenda. Both of them are basically requests for reviews. So the first is about the RAID configuration API. We've had a couple of different people working on this API for a while now, I think about a year. There was not really a design document. I think the work on that started before we started really asking for design documents for things like this. And so some of the reviews have taken a little bit of time, especially I know myself when I come back to it after a few weeks, I have to remember everything, and that makes the reviewing go slowly. So I took a little bit of time this week to put together a design document to try and summarize what's in that pull request, why it is the way it is, and that sort of thing. And I came up with a couple of differences that I felt like, based on looking at the code with that in mind, that we would need to change it in a couple of different ways. So I would appreciate reviews both on the design and on the implementation. And at this point, I think it's probably better to focus on the design and get some agreement about that, and then we can adjust the implementation. And it was not significant adjustments, so I'm not expecting a lot of rework. But there were a couple of things that were left out of the implementation that came up in the design. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that one before we move on to the next item? Okay, the next one is another design review. We talked a while back, it's probably been a couple of months now, about rebuilding the bare metal operator using KubeBuilder instead of operator SDK. I won't go into a lot of the details for the reasoning behind that. We're on a really old version of the operator SDK right now, and we need to update regardless of whether we choose to go to KubeBuilder or not. And the design document talks about why choosing KubeBuilder seems to make sense for the community. Did anybody have a chance to look at that already? Does anybody have any questions about that one? I would like to get started on work on that relatively soon, because I'm going to have a window of time where I can do the work, and then that window is going to close, and I don't want to put it off too long.
Yeah, I'd just add to that, they basically seem to be the same thing at this point. Like the 1.0 of operator SDK is based on KubeBuilder, so it's like it sticks to one and half dozen the others. So it's more a case of we need to update from the ancient version of operator SDK that we're using.
Yeah, that's true. So the operator SDK people, that team has expressed that they intend to converge with KubeBuilder for Go-based operators, and they're essentially the same now. I don't know if they generate exactly identical stuff, but they're compatible. And it seems like the features of operator SDK that go beyond what KubeBuilder has are not things that we necessarily care about using. So so the design document talks a little bit about that, but it doesn't go into all the details. And I still need to respond to Zane's review comments. So.
If I may ask quickly, the operator SDK, does it now support this webhooks for conversions and things like this, or still is it not?
1.0 does.
Yeah, 1.0 does, but updating from what we have to 1.0 is basically the same rewrite. because it's
I mean,
essentially operator SDK uses KubeBuilder now.
It's literally the same rewrite.
Yeah. So we wouldn't really gain anything by just updating to that. That would have been ideal if there was a better migration path. The rework is not actually terrible, and the design links to a proof in concept that I did probably 3 or 4 weeks ago now, where there's a branch in my fork on GitHub with all of the changes that we would need. And it's going to be kind of messy to review the pull request, which is why the design, I wanted the design document to talk about the process and all of that, so that people who do come along to review that pull request have an idea of what to be looking for. Largely, it's messy because nothing ends up living in the same directory that it's in right now. So all the files end up getting moved around and stuff. But the benefit is that I know that some of the folks that have been doing work to have different variations of like customized deployments for the different images and things like that within that repo, it will work the same way now after the rewrite that like the cluster API provider repo does. So that might be a little simpler. All right, does anybody have any other questions or comments about that one before we move on to Mail's topic? All right, Mail, you're up.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, just quick topic there about the Metal operator. Figured out that actually we are using a base image, like the Metal Cube base image in there to build the BMO image that we have in k.io. And that base image is actually very old, like it's based on CentOS 7, sorry. It's like nearly or even over a year old, so quite risky to keep running this kind of things. So I would like to propose a discussion. Well, the straightforward way would be just to update the base image to CentOS 8 and make sure that we regularly rebuild it to make sure that everything is up to date. But I would also maybe like suggest that we switch to a distroless image as a base for BMO. That is the same way we're doing for CapM3 and the other controllers, Go-based controllers. So we do not have a distro in the image. That makes things a bit lighter and also a bit more secure. So there's just the executable then that was made in the builder. So I'd like to hear opinions, specifically like people from Red Hat or whoever would want to keep this CentOS based image, or like know if we could just like move on to this alternative.
Do we use that base image for anything else?
Yeah, I was checking. Actually, the ironic images are all directly based on CentOS 8.
Yeah.
So I didn't find any reference to the base image anywhere else, but I might have missed something, obviously. But
yeah, okay. I don't personally see any issue moving to a distroless image for that. When we build images as part of OpenShift, we have to use a different base image anyway, so we're modifying that stuff anyway. So I'm not sure it makes a whole lot of sense for the community anymore to be using CentOS, especially since we don't need the GenISO image binary in there.
How is this image? How is the distroless? Sorry, how is the distroless image built from raw upstream components, or is there some other basis for that?
Well, yeah, we get it directly from Docker Hub. I need to check what is in the Docker file for that one, or like how it's built.
Got it. Thanks.
It's the base for all the CAPI components and the cluster API and all this.
Yeah, it's just enough stuff that you can put a Go binary in it and it would work, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why a Go binary like bare metal operator should have a whole huge distro in there. So I would say go ahead.
Okay, great. Then I will put a PR together, like pretty straightforward, right? It's just Dockerfile modification, and then submit that as soon as possible.
All right, sounds good.
It means that maybe we can also deprecate the base image repository if it's not used anymore.
Yeah, if we can verify that nothing else is using it within our stuff, then I think it's safe to deprecate that and or maybe archive the GitHub repo or close it down. I don't know the best way to close that.
Yeah, I think we can just archive it so that it's still around in case there's anything.
So the Ironic stuff's using a different base image, did you say?
Yes, Ironic is directly using CentOS 8 as a base image.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably going to continue to need to have distro in there, but if this repo is not used for that, then it's probably not used for anything.
Yeah, I checked. So I checked Ironic Inspector, Ironic, and the IPA downloader. What I didn't check, and I don't know if you're still using it, this IP manager. Like there was the an image also for something like managing the IP address of the node.
Yeah, the static IP manager.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I know we do still use that. Is that not part of the community implementation anymore?
In the deployments that we use in Metal3 Dev, we actually use Keep Alive D for Ironic.
Okay.
So it's not used there.
Okay. Well,
but it's also anyways based on CentOS 7, but CentOS not the base image.
Yeah. Well, that feels like something, if it's really only being used by Red Hat, that we can just carry downstream. I mean, we have a fork of it anyway, so we can just sort of not worry about that repository upstream if nobody else is using it. All right, does anybody else have any other comments or questions on this before we move on? Okay, Sumit, you had some issue triage questions?
Hello. Yeah. So I think Mail and Feruz already took a look at this, and
okay, so these have already been triaged. Was that all you needed? Was triage, or did you have questions about the deep?
For this 461, I mean it was still issue, so I reopened with the provided proper logs. So I think Dimitri asked for it, the logs. Maybe Dimitri is not on the call, but probably he can check the recent logs I shared. He wanted to have a RAM disk and the inspector logs, so we updated those.
Okay.
And this was earlier working, so if I found the content in one of the Metal3 blog, so I suppose somewhere in between this might have broken.
Were you able to figure out if the data is present in the introspection data from like Ironic Inspector and just missing on the BMO side, or if it is?
It is missing in the BMO side only.
Okay, so it's there on the Ironic side. So
yes,
okay.
Yes. So that is what I've attached in the log. You can also take a look if you want. Yeah. The ZZ file, the tar file I have attached. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So that will give you some idea. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. And then this 443.
I mean, there is no input required, but I just wanted to inform that, I mean, we are not able to use the kind cluster with the default settings. That is the only conclusion, right? So.
Okay.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, Furkat said he might work on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think recently he assigned this to himself, so maybe today itself.
Okay,
Today,
then let's see.
Yeah, sure.
Let's sync with him.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Okay. Shukan, you had a topic about network configuration API.
Yes. Okay, this is a new proposal, and we have discussed on Google Doc with the community a couple weeks ago, and we have summarized our discussion and write this design document and created this progress 2 weeks ago, I think. So I would like to get reviewed from the community to get the discussion to be continued.
Okay. I will certainly put that on my review queue and try to get to that as soon as I can. Does anyone else have any special input into this area that we want to make sure reviews it?
I'll take a look at it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Digambar.
Welcome.
I will also once I have time, review that.
Okay. Did anybody have any comments or discussion about it at this point, or do we all still just need to read the latest version of the draft?
Well, I quickly scanned through, and I still had some questions on the interaction between CapM3 and this the new controller. But maybe let's just talk about this on the PR itself.
Okay. Okay. So if there's nothing else about that one, Digambar, you're up next. Node section.
Yeah, actually, yesterday I had opened this issue in Ironic mid-cycle, and that's the review they posted in reply that someone, I think I forgot that person's name, he has submitted a new review spec. I think they are working on it, and but they agreed that there is no error data they are generating out of inspection, or there is no node history they are keeping where the actual errors are logged. So I think so we'll have to decide how to go about this, because if we want to implement. So at least Ironic at present there is nothing exist in Ironic, at least at error level.
So it sounds like there's some discussion to be had with the Ironic community about that, and then we would need to incorporate those changes into, I guess, the bare metal operator.
Yeah.
To expose that data to about a host.
Yeah. We need. So once this spec is implemented, then we'll pull it. But how much time it will take, I don't know. Till the time, is there any other approach I need to think, or will I have to wait? What do you say? Because there is no other option, I guess. Because other than implementing Redfish APIs, and then we'll have to write entire new library for it, Redfish APIs. So that's a lot of work. So that sounds not a good approach.
Yeah, that certainly would be a lot of extra work to build all of this independently of Ironic.
Yeah.
Do we have anybody from the Ironic group on the call who can comment on how far they think this design is gone or anything like that? Doesn't look like it.
So one of the things Julia asked is that maybe you can send a mail to the community and then community replies it. So is it possible? Can we send a mail to the community and everybody? But looks like this is not a near-term plan. So what we'll get out of it, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, certainly anyone is able to send email to the. Did you mean the Ironic community or the Metal3 community? I mean, there's a lot of overlap, but they're different mailing lists. So
both, I guess.
Yeah.
Metal3 we don't need, but for Ironic certainly, because everybody is here now. We can send a mail in Metal3, but certainly for Ironic.
Okay, yeah. So anyone is able to join that OpenStack mailing list and send email to it. I know that usually you put the project name in square brackets at the beginning of your subject line to make sure that members of that project notice the messages that go to that list, because it's shared by a bunch of different projects. But other than that, the list is free to join and anyone can send messages there. So if you wanted to start a conversation there, that seems like the right place to do it.
Okay, then I'll send a mail and I'll keep you in CC.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Well, I'm on that list, so I'll see it if it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. Are there any other comments about this one before we move on? Okay, the next thing on the agenda is issue triage, but before we switch to that, does anyone have any topics that haven't been added to the agenda yet that they want to bring up?
I do have a comment, and sorry I joined late. I had issues logging into Teams today for some reason, and now I have issues writing to the agenda, so that's why it's not there. Sorry about that. I'll fix, and thanks Doc for typing this. Anyway, I just wanted to raise a request for. We have an opportunity to organize a webinar, a CNCF webinar, propose a CNCF webinar. We thought about talking about Metal3 would be a good idea, and especially in the context, the CNCF sandbox project application is ongoing, and it would be a good way to give visibility to the project. And basically, this is a request for volunteers. If anyone would be willing to participate, please let me know. It would be, I don't know if you have watched any CNCF webinars in the past. It's basically it would be an introductory session because it's the first time that this audience, well, I know there was a presentation at the KubeCon in San Diego, but in this format, in this online format, it would be, I'm thinking, well, obviously open to suggestions, but the idea would be to introduce the project and potentially do some demo, and then be open to Q&A. It's 1 hour tops, but we should target a slightly shorter time. That's what I wanted to raise.
Okay, thanks for bringing that up. I wasn't aware that that was an opportunity open to us. Is anyone interested in helping Pep put that together?
Yeah, I'd definitely be interested. This is Mel.
Great, thanks, Mel. I'll get in touch with you. It can be more people as well. I mean, mail is great, of course, but a couple of people can also, it doesn't have to, the burden doesn't have to be on just one person. So feel free to step in as well.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, it seems like it would be great to have somebody who's actually using the tools in a real deployment. Talk a little bit about that, if we can fit something like that into the time that we have. I feel like we're mature enough that, we still do need to introduce the project for the audience, but we probably have people who are actually using it now. And if anybody who meets that characterization is on the call and is interested, it'd be good to have your contributions here.
we could maybe reach to the airship community to see if they would be interested to like chip in, or maybe like someone from like internal Ericsson products. We can get in touch to check that.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
All right, great. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Pep. Okay, does anyone have anything else, or shall we move on to issue triage?
Sorry, I had one question. I don't know, like I was late, so I don't know if it was discussed before. It was to Doug, like we discussed a while ago on Slack regarding this node. If some node goes to an error state, if there is any way to recover it, and you were suggesting that there was some work done, and making that work visible also in the community. So do you recall this chat, or do you want me to take the issue somehow again? So
I do remember, hold on, can't talk and type at the same time. I do remember that conversation. Zane is on the call, and he and I had been talking privately, internally, just about issues that we were experiencing and different ways to handle that. Zane, do you want to talk a little bit about that work?
Sure. So there's a couple of PRs up. One from me, which has been up for ages, to kind of rejig the states where we kind of bounce, whenever there's an error, we kind of bounce back to the registering state, which requires us to kind of figure out where we were before that and then bounce forward again once we're registered, which is kind of problematic. But the first one I think that's going to go in is from Andrea, which is to basically stop. Up until now, we've treated errors as like, okay, there's a failure, there's nothing more we can do, just stop. And there's actually very few real failures that are like that. I think the only ones is if you have like obviously malformed credentials, there's no point retrying them until the user changes the credentials. Other than that, we should keep retrying stuff because it could be a transient failure. You know, maybe the power's out. It could get plugged back in at some point. We should try again. So Andrea's patch kind of implements that, and then I'm expecting to have to rework mine on top of that to stop bouncing back and forth between states. So the registering state will be a thing that happens only once. After you create a host, it will go into registering, and then once it's registered, it'll move on as the rest of the state machine. And if there is a failure that causes us to need to re-register, we'll remain in the state we're in, because we don't actually know the cause of the failure, it turns out. So if provisioning fails, we re-register because there's only one error. So that will, when that change goes in, that will better record like where we were when an error occurred. So if an error happens in provisioning, there'll be an error flagged in the provisioning state, but we'll remain in the provisioning state, and eventually we'll go around again and retry. So I think those are the two main changes. Doug, I seem to recall there was a third one, but it slipped my mind what it was right now.
Yeah, I had one and I don't remember what it was either. And I feel like I was going to have to completely rework it based on the work that you and Andrea were doing. So it probably doesn't matter what it was. But I think to summarize the sort of intent, like Zane said, we have a bunch of states right now where we think we have an error that we can't really recover from. And so we stop doing anything at all to the host. And it ends up in a state where I think Kashif found you have to basically delete the host in order and recreate it in order to get it to even try again because of the error condition that it's in. And so we want to change the state machine in the bare metal operator to not have those kinds of states and to just keep retrying to do operations, which is a pretty significant behavioral change, especially when we're talking about retrying things on hardware, which may involve power cycling that hardware. So I don't know whether we need to have a broader conversation about that. And I think that was the conversation Kashif and I were having on Slack that day, was whether we needed to have a design document or maybe just talk about it in a meeting or a mailing list thread or something more than just the pull request, because there are several of them and it's going to take a few of them in order to get all of those behaviors working correctly. So.
Yeah, I mean, thanks a lot, Zain and Dag. I think that is already a very good direction, because that was like initially we were thinking that, of course, there are two types of errors, one which can not be recovered anymore. But once those are transient, we were thinking that whether it's possible for BMH to keep retrying to see if the state has changed. But obviously, there are pros and cons of all the approaches that we are talking about. But this looks already heading towards a very good direction. I will try to look into this Andreas and Zane's patch. I think it's on BMO, right? I have not seen the pull request. Okay, great. We will try to have a look on these, and then we will come back if we have something there. Thanks a lot for the update.
Okay. Did anybody else have anything to add to that? Any other questions about that work?
Hi, this is Sudeep. Not on this, but I have a general query actually, if I may ask.
Sure.
Yeah. So, is it possible to use, provide an option to use, a native Redfish API and not use Ironic at all? Is that a possibility that we can add that kind of a variable or some option when we are deploying the Metal3 to use that option and just use native Redfish API?
Someone certainly could build that. It would mean building a lot of the features that are in Ironic now into the bare metal operator. And I'm not sure that's the amount of work there is not something I would personally want to take on immediately. And I think we get a lot of benefit still from using Ironic and the community support that it has. What's your motivation for wanting to use Redfish directly in that way?
Yeah, the motivation is it will, it will help in eliminating certain other prerequisites like the DSCP, TFTP, PXE booting, those kind of things. And it could be just an option, to just use Redfish instead of Ironic. And if someone wants, one can use Ironic, of course. But I mean, there is some work already done in this regard. But, we have actually used the bare metal operator already and just use the Redfish. So we are kind of wondering whether we should create an entirely new provider, bare metal provider, because essentially we are still using the bare metal provider and only just using Redfish instead of Ironic. So I'm hoping like we can you combine that and just give an option in bare metal operator to use Redfish API.
So when you say the Redfish API like that, do you mean that you're attaching a virtual media to the host and booting that and using that to provision?
Yes.
What actually writes the image to the disk?
Yeah, so virtual media will be used. That's right.
And
but
what's
I mean,
in the virtual media? What actually writes the image to the disk?
Okay, that's actually going into a lot of details, but my question was whether Metal3 community will be willing to accept that, that we can have directly use of native Redfish API, whether that is agreeable.
Can I maybe jump in quickly here to ask if for you, so you said that the main goal for not using Ironic is not to have the infrastructure behind the TFTP, DHCP and all, but Ironic is actually able to use Redfish for booting the image like EPA, for example. So it's not, you don't have to have this whole infrastructure. It's able to do pretty much everything through Redfish, as far as I know. So would that solution be sufficient for you, knowing that it would take out of the picture the TFTP, PXE, and all that? Or do you need something more and you really don't want Ironic just to not have Ironic there?
Probably I need to have some more deep look into it. Maybe I will discuss with you offline, Mel. Then we can take it again in more detailed discussion and also involve the developers who are working on it.
Yeah, if you can use this, that would definitely remove a huge amount of work out of your shoulders. Whether you would be implementing a new provisioner for BMO or implementing a whole new CAPI provider, that would be a huge amount of work, while Ironic can probably do what you want to do, if I understood correctly what you're trying to achieve.
Okay, but I mean, yeah, I think let's discuss this offline. Well, I'll reach out to you and we can.
Sure, anytime. Happy to help.
Yeah. Thank you.
That sounds like a good next step. And I think just from my perspective, Mail mentioned the provisioner in the bare metal operator. That's an internal API that is meant to be able to plug in a different kind of tool to do the provisioning work. So if we were going to have another one of those and, you'd be able to start the operator and switch between them at runtime or, when it starts up or whatever, I would want to see a design document that talked about how that tool would actually work differently and how it meets the API requirements of the bare metal operator and that sort of thing, so that I could understand, the most basic thing, how is it going to write the image to the disk? Does it do RAID configuration, which is something that we've, are working on? Does it do the BIOS management and the way that we're talking about it and that sort of thing? All of those things may be possible. Certainly, Ironic is not the only tool that does those things, but I would want to understand how this new thing plugged in and met all of the implementation goals that we have so far. So, maybe that's after that other conversation. Maybe that's another next step, is to start working on that kind of a document.
Okay, understood. Yeah.
Okay, there's a couple of issues to triage. So before we close things out, let's go through that list. Kashif, it looks like you opened this one for MetalCube Dev End.
Yeah, I guess this one is currently being worked on by Yako, if I'm not wrong. So I think he is working towards solving this. So
okay, so I guess we can categorize it as a bug.
Yep.
Priority. Do we need a priority if it's actively being worked on, or?
Yeah, no, we probably don't need any.
Okay.
Maybe can you assign Yako on this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, Himanshu, you open this one.
Yeah. Hey, so yeah, didn't get some time to give latest updates, but in my some of the recent testing, I found that I faced this issue only with the cluster API Metal3 V1 Alpha 4, and I'm just today or tomorrow I will just do some confirmation runs and see if I'm still seeing that issue and update that in the comments.
Okay, so what is the label for waiting for information or needs?
Awaiting evidence.
Evidence.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. I can never remember what that one's called. All right. Mel, are you expecting any other labels on this one?
No, we are not really working on it yet. Like, just need confirmation from Himanshu now.
Okay. Is anybody on the call familiar with this one? Okay, this looks like another, certainly waiting for confirmation.
Yep.
Okay. Has anyone else seen this database connection issue?
I think that I might be seeing this while I was trying those config changes, because when I was checking the logs earlier, like apart from the errors that I shared with you earlier, when I checked even further, it seemed that the database connection was, although not exact this error, I think, but it was failing to connect. So I'm not sure, like this is like, so Ironic was failing to connect with the database after making some changes to the deployment, and basically it redeploys. So, and that is why probably it was complaining that it could not find that particular table. I'll update you with more details. I'm trying those things out.
Okay, yeah, if it was reporting that it couldn't find a table, I think it was actually talking to the database to determine that. So it sounds like it's a slightly different problem, although maybe you did see a connection issue in there too.
Yeah, might be. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right, that's it. All right, does anybody else have any other topics to raise before we call the meeting closed?
No, nothing from our side. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all for joining, and I will see you on Slack and again in the meeting in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, bye.